A genius twisted like a fox, whose goal is to be the perfect and unknown killer, the living example of the so-called lone wolf. The FBI and all its investigative and research associates for more than 20 years have been making untraceable bombs, handing them over to random targets, deceiving police and investigators, after publishing evidence to them that turned out to be false. He continued to live secluded in the mountains of Montana, without any of the inhabitants really knowing that this man they meet every morning and greet him, is one of the most wanted criminals in America. And the strangest thing in the story of this cunning is the genius way that the FBI applied to arrest him. We are talking here about the genius criminal Mr. Ted Kaczynski, born in Chicago in 1942. His parents are Polish-American. That's something that makes me think. Why are so many serial killers, criminals, and thugs and their children characterized by high intelligence and the study of the biographies of many criminals? Register that this is a fact. Who can explain this phenomenon to me? Write it to me in a comment. Because of this innate intelligence, he was accepted at Harvard University at the age of 16 years. He reached the dream of many young people who are 20 and 30 years old. The greatest university in the world, Ted Kaczynski, got a doctorate in mathematics at the age of 25 years, and then he became a professor at the University of California. But in his early years of teaching at this university, a situation happened to him that will change the personality of Ted Kaczynski forever, and even change the course of the lives of hundreds of people with him. Will change it for the worse. From the late 60s until the early 70s, the U.S. government began to develop its security, technical and intelligence apparatus to defeat the Soviet Union, or as it is known as the Cold War period. In that period, Kaczynski was a professor of mathematics, a social critic and a fierce opponent of the existence of technology developed and manufactured by the American government. In 1971, he resigned from university. He bought a piece of land in the middle of the forest in a remote area where no human voice could be heard. It has a small log hut. Kaczynski wanted to escape from all manifestations of technological and civilizational development. His ideas became aggressive and hostile to the way humans lived, which Kaczynski called a lazy and dirty life. He lived there alone without any contact with humans, and did not even use electricity or any machine. He remained that way for several years. You know Mowgli or Tarzan. He spent most of his time reading books and writing his own beliefs and ideas against technological development. The days, while he enjoys the quiet sounds of nature, and indulges in reading his favorite books, he hears the sounds of tractors, heavy machinery, and the sounds of helicopters flying over the area where he had been living peacefully for years. After researching the matter, he found that these sounds came from an area near his hut, where there are many logging machines. At that moment Kaczynski knew that his days of rest and tranquility had ended with the beginning of these works, and his anger at technological progress and the way in which he intensified. But the philosophical question that runs through the brain is how a genius became accepted by Harvard University at the age of 16. He got his doctorate in mathematics at the age of 25, and even became a professor at the University of California. To someone who believes in all these strange ideas, logic and analysis says that there must be a turning point in his life. This point or this event left something deep in his psyche. Now let's go back to the situation I told you a little while ago. At that time, in 1959, the CIA had started a project to study how to control the mind of spies who they worked for the Soviet Union. This program was called Inkara, and a former military intelligence officer during World War II, Harvard psychology professor Henry Murray, was assigned to head this operation, the goal of which is to explore ways and means to break one's personality and change one's personal beliefs. In its first year, he was invited to participate in this study, but what he thought was written in the invitation was just an intellectual debate between two teams from a different university. He commissioned Kaczynski and many other students to write lengthy essays about his deepest beliefs, values, and principles that never change and discuss them with other students. These students who will be debated are nothing but intelligence officers recruited and trained to break the will of the opponent and ridicule him, and to belittle everyone who loved or believed in him, and provoke him to the greatest possible degree. On the other hand, Marai was recording all the statements and observations from the reactions that Kaczynski makes. He remained involved in this study for 3 continuous years, and described that stage in his book as the worst experience of his entire life, and it remained stuck in his memory forever. And here the disaster struck. After discovering this plot orchestrated by Henry Marais, he decided that he would start thinking about revenge. Kaczynski's isolationist and introverted personality was greatly affected by this incident, so he hated all his fellow students and teachers, and his thoughts and beliefs about the development of melancholic technology became more than before. The decision to resign from his post and go to the forest to live alone with animals and beasts in complete serenity, this tranquility did not materialize as he had hoped because of all those annoying sounds of heavy machinery and constant logging. Kaczynski's decision that he would begin to take revenge. Starting from that moment, he made the first wooden bomb in 1978. The bomb that Kaczynski was making consisted of very simple and primitive materials, mostly wooden, and some wires, but their impact and the damage they caused were incredible. This genius man knew exactly how to hear it from nothing and then send it to universities and airports in the form of simple mailboxes. The first victim that Kaczynski decided to take revenge on is the root of all deep psychological problems. Henry Marais sent him a book mined from the inside as soon as he opened it until it exploded directly in his face and died instantly. He then began sending small bombs in the form of cigarette packs and booby-trapped wooden boxes to many university professors and airline bosses, as well as many factories that produced various electronic devices. Over the course of 6 years spreading terror among the people, this fear has spread from universities to airlines and shops everywhere, and lives have been lost without them knowing who this criminal is. But the worst has not yet begun. In 1980, Ted Kaczynski developed his bombs, transforming them from low-impact bombs to bombs made of batteries, chemicals and nails. This time with the aim of killing, destroying and killing as many victims as possible. The U.S. Federal Police, FBI, could not find any evidence to the source of these bombs. Kaczynski was so brilliant that he studied his every step with extreme precision. It's not surprising to learn that Kaczynski earned a doctorate in mathematics, as he made bombs from untraceable materials, and the ways in which he sent explosive boxes varied from time to time. The rest of the federal police have been spinning in vicious circles without any result for years and have only called him a Bamberg, short for the bomber of universities and airplanes. Huge prize money has been launched for information that leads them to this unknown person. 11 years later, in 1987, someone saw him placing an explosive box in a parking lot. He directly called the police and gave them an accurate description of his features and the way he dressed. For years, this made the FBI believe that he committed suicide, or blew himself up by mistake, and the case was closed, and it became forgotten because there was no evidence to lead them to this unknown man. But Kaczynski was preparing to do the worst. In 1993, he began sending more bombs than before, and explosions began to increase in most universities, airports, and factories. But this time he decided to do something very strange. In 1995, Kaczynski sent a 30,000-word essay talking about technology, capitalism, and also the exploitation of the Earth's resources to satisfy human desires. Before this speech, they thought that this criminal was just a madman who indiscriminately kills for no reason, but after reading those letters, it turned out that he is not as crazy as they thought, but rather a person with extreme philosophical attitudes and principles towards the Industrial Revolution that made him spread terror in an entire country. The government agreed to Kaczynski's threats. His letters were already published, so every American rushed to buy the newspaper to read the letters of this unknown criminal who became like a ghost in their eyes. And what Kaczynski was not waiting for was that his brother David would also read his letters. For technology, but he never thought his brother was him. Until he discovered that there was a strange similarity in the way the book was written on the newspaper and some sentences that Kaczynski was used to repeating in his memoirs. At that moment, he learned that Bomber was his brother. David had to report all his suspicions to the police. The FBI immediately launched a break-in. So the seller caught him in the act with bombs ready to be sent in the mail, and they found a bomb equipped to burn the cabin in case it was raided by the police. What's more, they found conclusive evidence and found his memoirs, and many other letters documenting all his actions and in his handwriting, and even wrote in his memoirs his plans and crimes that he would commit in the future. In 1997, the U.S. authorities charged him with many charges, including terrorism, and he was sentenced to 8 life sentences without the possibility of future release. And then he was placed in one of the most high-security prisons, which is Supermax prison, where the most famous killers and the most famous criminals, as well as drug barons and gangsters such as the drug baron Al-Shabo. But in 2021, she was transferred to a prison clinic in North Carolina after years in prison. When he was 81 years old, he lost a few days ago. The news spread on the international media while the guards inspected Ted's cell. They found him dead. The truth is that they found him committing suicide, and no one knows whether he committed suicide because of his boredom from all the years he spent in prison, and also the coming years that he will spend there until he dies, or because of his suffering with cancer that he contracted while in prison.